Where my slides go?
I'd like to welcome everyone to the Environmentals Track Stream, Bank, Mitigation, and Other Permit News. I'm Mike McGregor from Bacon Farmer Workman Engineering and Testing, and I want to thank you for joining. As we get started, I'd like to introduce the presenter for this session. He is Randall Payne with KYTC Division of Environmental Analysis. And so now I'll turn it over to Randy.
All right, thank you very much. Today I want to cover some main topics in this presentation. There are 5 of them. We'll be looking at the highlights of the regulatory framework, excuse me, that we work within. There's been some recent actions that affect the permitting and mitigation process, and we certainly want to visit that. Then we'll take a look at the options we have for mitigation and availability of those options, costs, and also look at some cost analysis associated with the different options we have for mitigation. And finally, we'll take a look at the challenges that we have for mitigation going forward, as well as some solutions. I just wanted to start out, this is of course, the primary instrument that we work under, everything that we do in DEA, as far as the ecology and permit section and the impacts to waters is related to the Clean Water Act. This was passed in 1972 and became law. And as you can see, it has a very lofty goal. And the objective of it was to maintain and restore the physical, chemical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. But it was recognized pretty quickly that that's pretty lofty, and we'll give ourselves an interim goal, and that interim goal we'll give ourselves till 1983 to meet that. Well, it's a fishable and swimmable goal, and it has nothing to do with aquatic life, which that's kind of what I think of when I think of the Clean Water Act, but it has to do with human health and whether the streams and lakes are free of human pathogens that would cause like gastrointestinal illnesses, where someone can recreate. And then likewise, for fish, is it safe to consume? And the primary pollutant of concern today with fish flesh is methyl mercury. That's nationwide. However, things have gotten better since the Clean Water Act became law. And at that time, it was estimated that 40% of the nation's waters met uses. And today, when I went on EPA's website, now it depends on what you're looking at, the different uses, but for this goal, they estimate that we've gone to about 60% support level. That's from 40% support level that, again, was estimated from the get-go. Well, within the branch, the primary permit that we're dealing with, the section of the Water Quality Act, is Section 404. That's also known as the dredge and fill permit. And anytime a person is going to impact waters of the U.S., that's going to require a 404 permit. Now, that trigger may or may not require mitigation to whether it be a stream or a wetland, but you will certainly have to get the 404 permit. And at the same time, folks in there are working on like Section 7, because that's one of the key components that has to go along with the Section 404 permit application, and that has to do with the threatened and endangered species. Let's take a look now just at the waters that we're typically dealing with when we're getting our permits, as well as thinking about the potential for needed mitigation. And these are the four primary waters that we're dealing with in Kentucky. And of course, perennial streams, just like they say, those are streams that flow year-round. Even during drought conditions, water may be very low and it may be hard to perceive, but there's going to be flow in those perennial streams. Intermittent streams, very common depending on the geology, the area one's in. These are waters that flow part of the year, and they're going to respond to the wetter periods of the year. Ephemeral streams, these are located high in the watershed, and they only respond to runoff events from precipitation. And then wetlands. Wetlands are flooded areas, and they may only be flooded seasonally, but they will have water during part of the year standing. Usually we'll have hydric soils, and they'll have characteristic vegetation associated with them. Let's take a look at this cross-section of landscape and a watershed here, just to drill down a little bit farther with the different stream classes. You'll see high up in the watershed, those lines that are in the dark green, those represent the ephemeral waters. And their stream bed is never in contact with the groundwater. So they're totally dependent on storm and runoff events for any kind of water flow. We come on down in the watershed as you start picking up the areas of blue. That represents the intermittent waters. Those waters, again, will respond to precipitation. They have flow during the wetter periods of the year, and their stream bed is also in contact with the groundwater as that water table comes up closer to the surface during the wetter periods of the year. Then lastly, on down in the watershed, of course, we pick up our perennial waters. Those again, the stream bed's always in contact with the groundwater, and they'll flow year-round. I grabbed this, just a generic hydrograph showing stream flow and different types of streams that we've covered. As you can see, the perennial stream on the top. For the period of this hydrograph, it shows continuous flow. As you move on down, you'll see the seasonal flow. That's representing intermittent streams. And during a period of the year that's drier, you can see there's no flow. All of a sudden it pops up, and then it starts heading back down as you head into a dry season. And then those three blips at the bottom represent the ephemeral flows, and they're just that. They're very short duration, typically 24 hours, unless you've got a back-to-back heavy precipitation event, is all they're going to flow for. I went to the USGS, the Kentucky website. With USGS, I wanted to just get an actual hydrograph, this is the Rockcastle River located at Billows. And USGS has stream gauges. You'll see them on our bridges located throughout the state. And those offer continuous flow data. Of course, the Rockcastle River is a large stream and it's perennial. As you can see, it's responding to what we typically see for a precipitation pattern in the state. This is for the year 2019. So on the left-hand side, you'll see during the winter months, we've got plenty of rainfall, usually pretty heavy precipitation. And so you're pegging up there at about 15 to even above 20,000 cubic feet per second discharge during the winter. You'll start seeing in the growing season sometime in March there, and it continues. How the river is responding to really the period of year. It's not so much the loss of precipitation, but you have a lot of heavy evapotranspiration. It's of course ongoing, so the river is responding to that. And then as you continue down through the year, of course, you get into start getting into the drier periods. And so starting sometime late this month, early next month, as you can see, October there, hopefully. That's the driest month on average in Kentucky. So that river goes all the way down to about 10 cubic feet per second, and then quickly rebounds as we start heading into the winter and start picking up that heavy precipitation. Now let's look at, now that we've got a little bit of a handle on these different types, let's look at the type of streams and whether or not they're jurisdictional under the Waters of the U.S. rule. And that has some changes associated with it because this past June that there was a new Waters of the U.S. rule that rolled out, and it redefined a lot of the streams that had been jurisdictional or water bodies are no longer jurisdictional. Now, perennial and intermittent streams are both jurisdictional. The reason that it can be important to differentiate between these two is because if you're in the western 2/3 of the state, that's going to have a real impact on the 404 permit and the mitigation that may be required because there's different factors calculated into determining the amount of mitigation that's going to be required depending on whether you have a perennial or intermittent stream. And as you might guess, perennial streams are going to, of course, have a higher value. Now, these streams can be difficult to recognize. One way you can recognize these streams is oftentimes going out and just happen to stumble onto the right time of year. And you can recognize there's flow in some streams, whereas other larger, smaller streams, but yet large, there's no flow or there's likely to be ponded water, and those would be your intermittent streams. But that's likely not to happen unless you're just out in the field a lot. And so another way of determining those would be to look at the riparian zone. There's going to be a difference between a perennial stream, riparian zone, and an intermittent stream. First of all, there's going to be a difference in the depth of that riparian zone. And there's also going to be a difference in the general assemblage of plants associated with a stream that's flowing year-round versus one where the water table drops down below that surface during part of the year. But the Waters of the U.S. rule rolled out this June, as I said. It also offers another way to take a look at that, and that is, of course, to make sure that a person is out in the field and the period that they're looking at their site under, see if it's truly representative of normal precipitation conditions. You can see this graph here. You'll see the top line there, the blue line. That is the current year's precipitation up to that point. And you can see maybe the tick marks, and that represents where someone has gone out in, I think that has the 16th of March anyway, and that's when they made their observation. Now, it's really important to make sure, again, whether you got that stream called right or not. And one of the ways to look at that is look at the graph there that's represented in yellow, which is a 30-year rolling average. And that data comes from NOAA's climatological data set. And so that can be downloaded from the website for any geographic location. And so that's a 30-year rolling average. And it also, the WOTUS rule asks you to look at 3 30-day periods from the point of observation, because obviously you really want to get that kind of duration under normal precipitation to make sure that you're making these determinations correctly. But here again, that's not always possible in the world that we work under, because oftentimes we're having to go out and we got to have the permit as soon as we can get it. So we may not have that luxury, and then we're just left at the call of the regulators, which I will say they have a pretty good degree of latitude in making that determination. Now let's look at these other waters, because this is where we really get into some changes with the new rule. The ephemeral streams, they were waters of the U.S. Prior to June 22nd, and now they're excluded waters. So they're no longer necessary to get the permit if that's the only streams that a person would be impacting. And there certainly, of course, would be no mitigation involved. That's really a big deal, especially if you're in about the eastern half of the state, where waste areas can be pretty extensive, and those waste areas oftentimes are associated with ephemeral streams. And so, this can knock millions of dollars off of a project as far as mitigation costs are concerned. The next would be ditches. Ditches are generally excluded waters. The exception, as I read the WOTUS rule, would be those ditches that now carry jurisdictional waters. So let's say that there's a jurisdictional stream and the flow has been diverted into a ditch. Well, at that point, that ditch becomes jurisdictional. But by and large, again, they're excluded waters. Groundwater, long-standing, has been typically excluded from waters of the U.S., and that continues to be the case under the new rule. However, I'll say there's some subtle differences here in what's actually considered groundwater and not under the WOTUS. So if you're in a karst area, which we have a pretty good amount in different parts of the state, and you run into losing streams. These are streams where the flow will be on the surface, and then all of a sudden you'll be standing there and lo and behold, it goes underground. And and it'll flow for some distance underground. So you've got this dry stream bed that will only be wet during really wet periods of the year. And you go on down in that watershed and you'll see where it pops back up to the surface, and then it'll discharge into the receiving water body. Well, that's a case where those waters are considered waters of the U.S., even though they go underground for however far. As long as they pop back up to the surface, discharge into jurisdictional waters, that is jurisdictional. Another case might be where, let's say you have a stream, headwaters, and then somewhere midway down in the watershed, that stream has been moved underground for, let's say, infrastructure, maybe a municipality. And then on down the watershed, again, it surfaces. And as long as it discharges to a jurisdictional water body, some of that stream will be considered jurisdictional, but not that section that is underground. So the headwaters, as long as it meets the hydrologic conditions to be jurisdictional, would be considered waters of the U.S., as well as that downstream that daylights. Ponds are typically, of course, located in uplands. They generally now are excluded waters. So if you have a pond that's isolated in an upland, obviously it's excluded. But even if that pond is built in an ephemeral stream, again, since there's a break in jurisdictional waters because of that ephemeral stream, the pond itself would be excluded. Wetlands, of course, are probably the most complex. They can get that way anyway. Wetlands in general, though, are going to be waters of the U.S. So anytime a wetland abuts a jurisdictional water, even if that wetland is not connected throughout the year, it can still be a jurisdictional water. Let's say you have a dam between that wetland and the jurisdictional water, a berm, or maybe even a road that separates the wetland from jurisdictional water. Typically, it's going to have a culvert or a ditch, something that will connect it. And in that case, it will continue to be waters of the U.S. Let's see, the other type would be, so yeah, and even if there are no culverts or ditches, as long as that wetland overflows that berm or whatever, sometime during a typical year, it will again be treated as waters of the U.S. And then those wetlands that might be to the eye isolated at glance because maybe they're separated by a sand dune or a bank. If that's the only type of hydrological separation and it's natural, that would continue to be considered jurisdictional waters. So it truly has to be an isolated wetland. So options we have to fulfill or require mitigation. We have 3 different options, and I've got these listed in the way that the mitigation rule lists them in the preference of fulfilling those mitigation requirements, and that is through a mitigation bank credit purchase. Second option, preferred option, is the in lieu fee mitigation payment. And then lastly is a permittee responsible mitigation. So looking at these individually in a little more detail, third-party mitigation banks or commercial mitigation banks where a company would go out and restore a watershed and then offer credits for sale on the market. These credits are typically sold at a price that's somewhere close to the value based on the in lieu fee payment. One of the issues that we have in Kentucky with relying on commercial mitigation banks is the fact that many of our watersheds do not have any of these banks. So that's oftentimes not an option. KYTC has established lots of mitigation banks over the years. In fact, I think looking at records, mitigation banks go back maybe about 35 years with the agency. One of the, to me, exciting things that's occurred with our mitigation program was back in March of last year. The Army Corps of Engineers approved our umbrella mitigation banking instrument, or often referred to as an UMBI. And that was really important because that offers some real assurances for the agency moving forward with mitigation banks, because it's an agreement essentially between us and the Army Corps of Engineers as to how those banks will be used and managed, and also with that was issued a letter of permission, which of course is a form of an individual 404 permit. And of course we do have to get the 404 permits as well as the 401 water quality certification anytime we're building a mitigation bank, because initially we're impacting waters of the U.S. And that provides us with a known path for every bank as far as what the expectations are permit-wise. And with it also comes a clock that's put on the Corps of Engineers. It's a 120-day clock. So from the time that we submit a conceptual plan, they have 120 days to make a decision as to whether to approve, disapprove, or seek more information. So it has a lot of pluses, and that will be the instrument that we'll be working under as we go forward now. Currently, we have 10 banks that have credits available. We have 2 new banks. One of them is in Livingston County, and that's what we refer to it as, Livingston County Bank. It is a wetland credit-only bank. Then we have a bank located in Boston, Nelson County, Kentucky. That is going to offer both wetland and stream credits, and it is currently under construction. We should receive our first release of credits of both wetland and stream sometime next year. Now, Livingston County Bank, we did receive our first release of mitigation credits for wetlands early this year. Well, I want to take a look at the health of our banks as far as availability throughout the state. In green, of course, represents that area that where determined we have a pretty healthy number of stream credits. Of course, that's a judgment call. But in the Jackson Purchase region, we've got a pretty good number of credits available for use. And of course, again, these are stream credits. Then you can see in the central area of the state in yellow, those are areas where we do have credits available, but the banks are getting low enough to where any project of any size would probably exceed the credits that we have. I will say that western portion of Service Area 5, that area does not have credits available currently, and the only reason I decided to code that as yellow is because we will gradually start seeing credits come available starting next year, because that is the service area that the Boston Bank will provide credits going forward. The rest of the state, we have no stream credits available. So we're depending on in lieu fee payment, as well as if there's a commercial mitigation bank available. KYTC also has some wetland credits available, and most of the state, as you can see, our credits are in good shape. It's color-coded green. However, those areas in yellow, starting first down the Jackson Purchase region, anytime we're going to have a road construction project there, you're in all likelihood going to impact wetlands. And we have well, as a matter of fact, we're virtually out of credits there now, and that's been a recent occurrence. Moving on to the west there, you can see the next large area, that's Service Area 4 and Service Area 3. That's the Greenwater River watershed, and it's kind of divided in half based on the upper reaches of the watershed and then the lower reaches. We just recently there expended all the available credits, so that actually should now be in red. However, the lower portion, again, we have the Livingston County Bank, so that the reason that's still in yellow is because the release of credits is gradual. But it will service that area from Livingston County, the Tredewater River watershed, and on up through Henderson area. Nice thing about the Livingston Bank was earlier in the year when we had the Smithland Bridge letting and it needed mitigation associated with the impacts, we were able to use credits that had just been released from that bank for that project. And the next area in yellow there is kind of northeast Kentucky, the upper Licking River watershed, and down through portions of the mid-Kentucky watershed. Again, we have credits available. It's just that they're kind of getting low in that region. Well, the next option is the in lieu fee mitigation option, and that is a program that the Army Corps of Engineers has in the mitigation rule. In Kentucky, they have delegated that authority or that program to Kentucky Fish and Wildlife to manage and administer. And what that entails is that this is a mechanism for the mitigation program to get started in the state. And so the Army Corps of Engineers advanced to Kentucky Fish and Wildlife X number of credits in each one of those different service areas that you can see there on the map. That's because, again, there had been no stream restoration put on the ground yet, so you've got to have some credits in advance to get rolling. And as you can see, those mitigation costs there are associated with each region. They vary. They vary from a low of about $330 per credit all the way up to almost $900 per credit. There's also an additional fee that comes with that, and that's a 20% fee. That's assessed because of the temporal loss that I just talked about. That lag period of time that between the credits being sold and impacts being made to jurisdictional waters and the time that it takes then to start actually restoring streams and getting that restoration on the ground. That link I have provided for you in a handout that if you're interested in, you can grab that. There's a number of links on the different topics that we're going through today. Now the issue that we have now with our in lieu fee program is that while we still have advanced credits throughout almost all the state, they're coded in green. Fish and Wildlife has not put down enough stream restoration projects in 2 of our service areas there and so they have sold all the advanced credits in those regions, and one of them being the Big Sandy, Little Sandy service area. So that's our District 12. That occurred back in November of 2017. They ceased selling in lieu fee credits. We do have there is a commercial mitigation bank that offers option for credits. So at least we can move forward in that area with mitigation available to us. However, if you look on to the next area there, that's essentially the lower Licking watershed and northern Kentucky, so District 6 and pretty much all of District 9. In lieu fee credits ceased to be available in January 31st of this year. That was a pretty big shock, I think, to everybody. We know that there's going to be a lot of need going forward in the future. There's a lot of growth, especially in northern Kentucky. So that's one of the challenges that we're facing with mitigation. Is certainly that area. There's no commercial mitigation banks established. Currently, we have a bank that has under 600 credits available, and that would service the area of northern Kentucky that would include Campbell and Kenton counties, and as well as the area associated with District 9. But 600 credits, of course, is likely not going to be enough for very much at all, a single project. So we're essentially sitting here without any in lieu fee credits as well as mitigation bank credits available to us there. The western portion of northern Kentucky, from Boone County westward, that is that portion, of course, that's not associated with the Licking River watershed. We do have a bank that we have just under 4,500 credits available to us. But again, that service is a much larger area, and even 4,500 credits can be snapped up pretty quickly with any project of very much size. I will mention that the in lieu fee program, though, for wetlands, there are advanced credits available for those waters. And then the last option for mitigation is permittee responsible mitigation. There's 2 different forms. On-site permittee responsible mitigation is just that. It's where you do stream restoration within the right-of-way of the project. That is really discouraged. As a matter of fact, Louisville District of Corps of Engineers, as far as I know, they're no longer wanting to permit any on-site permittee responsible mitigation projects moving forward because they're just ripe for failure. And I think most people that have been associated with them have seen that. And then, of course, you end up paying double for mitigation because you've got to go out and you've got to make good on that mitigation if it fails. And as you can imagine, if it's in the right of way, there's going to be maintenance ongoing, mowing, and that just makes it difficult. A viable option is off-site permittee responsible mitigation. That is, like I said, that's viable, and it's something though that should be looked at as a last resort for mitigation needs, because you're probably already well within a project at that point, and recognizing the need for mitigation possibly. And well, you've got to find a watershed that would be suitable for stream restoration, that would be within the service area necessary for that project. and that property then is going to have to be available. So again, while those variables oftentimes do come together, that could be problematic. So, but it's something we've got in our quiver, and especially as we think in Northern Kentucky, that might be something that we would resort to if necessary, certainly. Okay, I want to do a cost comparison and look at these different mitigation options that we have, and how does that vary in costs and impacting potentially project budgets. Let's do a comparison first, looking at a project that they've got 8,100 credits are needed to fulfill the mitigation for the stream impacts, and they have 5 credits necessary for wetland impacts. So if mitigation is going to occur through the in lieu fee program, those 8,100 credits, then again, you have to tack on that 20% temporal loss. And let's say it has a credit value of $415. That's the cost. So you can see real quickly, we run into some real money here at just over $4 million for stream mitigation. With the wetlands, same scenario, the 20% is tacked on. The cost per wetland credit is $61,500. So we're looking at $369,000 there. So about $4.4 million in mitigation costs alone for that project using the in lieu fee program. And then if we have the option of a commercial bank, you can see there's a difference here. We don't have that 20% temporal loss because the mitigation is already on the ground. So we're just under $3.4 million for the cost of stream mitigation, and just slightly over $307,000 for the wetland costs. So all told, that's about just under $3.7 million. So that's a case where by being able to utilize a commercial bank, that project saved in taxpayer money about $750,000. Let's do another comparison here. Again, the same project, 8,100 credits. Of course, we've already talked about the in lieu fee costs, about $4.4 million. But now let's look at what those costs would be if KYTC has a mitigation bank that they've established. Again, you don't have the temporal loss. The cost per credit is $415. However, and this is a very conservative average. On average, we can construct the bank, and those credits are going to cost about 65 cents on the dollar, oftentimes less than that. So here we are at just under $2.2 million now, almost cut the stream mitigation costs in half. And then the wetlands, same scenario. We're just under $200,000. So about $2.2 million, again, in costs for using a KYTC mitigation bank. So that project has saved over $2 million in mitigation costs. Well, I wanted to look at some solutions that we really do have at hand as far as the in lieu fee situation and no credits available moving forward in Northern Kentucky service area. Currently, we have a line on property that's located in Harrison County in Little Beaver Creek watershed. That project would generate about 18,600 credits. We've already done a proposal for that bank, so we know what that would probably generate. Those are stream credits, and it would save KYTC almost $5 million by going that way, because Here's a case where we'd be saving about 47% as compared to the in lieu fee cost. So we're able to build this bank, and the credits are going to cost us about 53 cents on the dollar. And it really gets better than that, because not only are we saving $5 million over the life of that bank, or any bank typically that we're going to build, because again, most of these banks are somewhere between 18 and 21,000 credits. Is what they'll generate. As that cost, of course, is stable through time. That's you build it and you're done. And whereas the in lieu fee costs, what I have seen since I've been with the DEA now for 4 years, is that almost every year you can count on an increase in lieu fees, and those increases have not been inconsequential. So that $5 million is actually going to be much more than that over the lifetime of that bank. Couple of areas where we need wetland credits: Jackson Purchase and Green River. We have property that we could move forward on in Marshall County. This would generate about 100 wetland credits. That's a tremendous number of credits, but also in an area that needs, well, will need quite a number of wetland credits in the future. And that would last the agency for years, probably, generating a bank with that many credits. And then to take care of the Upper Green River watershed, again, there's no credits available there. We have property we could access and build a bank there. That bank would generate an estimated 46 wetland credits, and again, at a very similar favorable savings. Well, I wanted to leave you with, again, this link is available in the handout. This is a screenshot of RIBBITS. This is an Army Corps of Engineers tracking system or database, where they store all of the in lieu fee and commercial and third-party agency banks information is located here. And RIBBITS, thank goodness for the acronym. It stands for Regulatory In Lieu Fee and Bank Information Tracking System. Once you navigate to that web page, you'll see the menu on the left-hand side. You just scroll through that, pick whatever topic you're interested in, and you'll get up-to-date information on availability of a commercial bank, maybe in an area of interest, or an agency bank, and the number of credits that would be available and the credit types. So with that, if there are any questions, I will try to answer those. Thank you. Drainage ditches considered ephemeral streams. Good question. No, they're excluded. If they're a ditch, they're at least my reading of the WOTUS rule is a ditch is different. It's not natural, which an ephemeral stream would be, and so it would not be classified as ephemeral. What characteristics determine it a stream? Well, again, if we're talking about an ephemeral, that would be connected directly to the larger watershed, whereas a ditch would be recognized as a constructed stream and wouldn't fit naturally in a watershed. The setting wouldn't. So that's the way I would respond to that one. Good question. Yeah, Dave. you know that answer. Definitely will be challenged. As a matter of fact, it has already been challenged, and I would say that hopefully we could end up with a scenario like we had with the last WOTUS rule, where you've got one rule in place in one part of the country and another rule in place in the other part of the country. So most definitely. Okay, the next question: do you have to pay in lieu fees or bank credits within the same water? Yes. Well, let me back up a minute. Within the same watershed, the in lieu fee program is structured where if we go back and were to look at that map, those are very large watersheds. Those border on, well, they're they're large watersheds. So we're talking like the Kentucky River Basin divided into two different sections. So that gives you a feel for how large of a geographic area in a watershed we're talking about. So while it might not be in the very same watershed, if you get into a specific stream that you're talking about, say Buck Creek with the last presentation, I mean, that's located in the Upper Cumberland watershed, and that Upper Cumberland watershed is a part of a service area. And so no, it doesn't have to be in the same watershed, but it does have to be in the same service area, which is a basin or a larger watershed. I hope that answered your question. Any other questions? All right. Well, we have some time here, so Donna, if I didn't answer one of those questions to your satisfaction, let me know, and I'll try it again. But let me scroll back through here. Let's look at that in lieu fee map again. Yeah. So, let's just look at that area, for example, down there in the southeast portion in green. You can consider that a watershed. That's the Upper Cumberland watershed. But of course, within that huge watershed, you've got many smaller watersheds. So maybe Laurel Fork would be a watershed that's within Upper Cumberland. But you would have to make that purchase within that service area. You couldn't go, say, in that adjacent bluish color or purplish color there just to the west. You couldn't go and make your purchase in that service area or watershed. And while that's still a part of the Cumberland River, they consider that part of the lower Kentucky River watershed. So hopefully that made it a little bit clearer. I think it's not as well, there has to be in lieu fee credits available, say in if we're working in the lower Licking River there in maybe Kenton County. You had a project that needed mitigation, and you couldn't mitigate with in lieu fees, and you couldn't go next door, say into that area upstream that's in the light blue and purchase credits if they were available there, because that would be in a different service area. There's no commercial bank located that would service that region, and we have no bank to service that region. So that would necessitate maybe a permittee responsible project. I'm not sure. Did that help, or did it? Okay, good. And if you want to send me an email or give me a call, I'll certainly be glad to talk to you in more detail about that. Thank you. Okay, if there are no other questions, I guess we will end this session.